Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Well, greetings to everyone. This is Colonel Alan West, the Executive Director for the National Center for Policy Analysis. I'm guest hosting here, Point of View Radio, because my good friend Kirby Anderson is upstate New York. And I asked his daughter, was he goofing off or not? And she kind of tried to make an excuse for Dad. But Dad's on vacation, and it's an honor and a blessing that he would ask me to guest host his show. We got a pretty interesting show lined up today. We're going to start off talking about the economic situation. Since just last week, we had the tax plans for the two respective presidential candidates being produced. So Pamela Villarreal, who is the senior fellow at the National Center for Policy Analysis, will talk to us about that. Then we're going to talk about, the Christian role in a constitutional republic in these United States of America, especially in this election cycle. We're going to have Pastor Todd Wagner of the Watermark Community Church here in Dallas, Texas, join us in the second half hour. And then the third half hour, we're going to talk about foreign policy, national security. That seems to be a prevalent issue for everyone right now, especially as we just heard Mr. Trump give his speech on Monday. So we're going to have Dr. David Grantham, former Air Force Office of Special Investigations and Intelligence Officer, and also a senior fellow with the National Center for Policy Analysis. And then the last 30 minutes, we're going to take your calls, and we're going to have an open discussion about what do you think this country is heading right now as we go seriously into this presidential election cycle, which will be full bore coming out of Labor Day. So let's get it going. Let's get it started. And always remember, our caller line is 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. We're going to take all those calls and hear your conversations in that last 30 minutes of the show. But to kick it off, like I said, we just heard both of the presidential candidates last week give their economic plans, how they see economic growth in the United States of America. And I think there's a lot of disparate views on how they would see it as far as the role and relationship of government to the individual and the private sector. So what we have right now is Pamela Villarreal, who is our NCPA, National Center for Policy Analysis expert on retirement, economic growth, and tax issues. Villarreal has written studies and analyses on specific economic and retirement topics such as minimum wage effects, the job market, returns on stock and bond investments, retirement account reforms, and the NCPA state tax calculator. She has authored and co-authored numerous publications on diverse topics such as capital gains taxes, reverse mortgages, Social Security disability, and baby boomer spending habits. One of her studies, Wealth, Inheritance, and the Estate Tax, was co-authored with noted economist Jagadish Gokhale. Villarreal's work on the National Center for Policy Analysis 401k borrowing calculator and the negative consequences to borrowing from a 401k has been recognized by media throughout the country. Among those was Kathy Kristoff, the award-winning personal finance columnist with the Los Angeles Times. Pam Villarreal routinely shares her insight with media outlets throughout the country. Her work has been covered by Fox Business News, CNBC, Forbes, Bloomberg, USA Today, Money Magazine, and the Washington Times. She is a much in-demand speaker on retirement and tax issues. And joining us by phone now is the senior fellow at the National Center for Policy Analysis on tax and entitlement programs, Pamela Villarreal. How are you, Pamela?
Well, thank you for having me, Alan. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. And prayers go out because I know you're recovering from a little surgery, and that's why you couldn't join us in studio.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, let's get right to it. We've got you for about 25, 26 minutes. let's talk about these two tax plans that we had last week. Let's start off talking with the personal income tax side. What are the two big differences you see between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump?
Well, excuse me, Hillary Clinton's plan is really very similar to the plan we have now. The difference is, though, she really wants to stick it to the rich. So she is proposing basically a 4% surtax for people earning $5 million or more. Now, that sounds like, that's not that big of a deal. Let those rich people pay those taxes. But obviously that has an impact on investment and capital, because those are the people that invest in business, that provide capital, that provide venture capital. So to take more of their money in taxes could have an effect on the rest of the economy.
Well, one of the things I saw as a big difference, let's talk about the different tax brackets, because currently right now we have 7 different tax brackets. What's the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton when it comes to the tax brackets on the personal income tax side?
Well, on the personal income tax side, Donald Trump wants to actually reduce the brackets to just 3. He with the top marginal rate being about 33%. That makes sense, because really what that does is that moves us toward more of a flatter tax system, which would stop penalizing people, with very high marginal tax rates when they start earning extra income. Whereas Hillary's brackets will pretty much be, what we have now, in addition to the surcharges, and then a change in the capital gains tax rates for assets being held a certain amount of years. Basically, as I said before, it's more taxes on the wealthy, although this would have a large effect on the rest of the economy. It would have an effect on people, as I said, who want to start their own business, or people who are looking for capital investment.
Mrs. Clinton came out and made the comment that she is focused on an economy that works for all. Is that an achievable goal for government tax policy?
Well, no. I think government tax policy should be focused on being fair, but really government tax policy should mainly focus on not penalizing people for working and saving. Even if Hillary Clinton adds taxes to the rich, even if she gives the middle class a bit of a tax break, which she supposedly hasn't indicated she's going to do. In fact, at one point she said she would raise taxes on the middle class. I think that was inadvertent. But, regardless...
They still clapped for it when she said it.
Exactly. Yeah. But regardless, the problem is with our current tax code is we penalize earning extra money, and we penalize saving extra money. And Clinton's tax plan is not going to change that. It's really going to be an extension of the current tax rates we have, with the highest, with the exception of the highest marginal rate. When you have that 4% surtax, the highest marginal rate is going to be about almost 44%. So really, government policy should be to reduce those taxes that discourage productive incentives like working and saving. But Hillary's plan, basically, she wants to get in there and throw stimulus money in order to stimulate the economy, instead of doing it through really common sense tax reform.
Well, it's amazing, because it seems that we've heard this whole thing about stimulus spending going back to January of 2009, February 2009, when the current president came into his office and into his administration. And we heard about shovel-ready jobs, but it seems that there weren't too many shovel-ready jobs. We're going to come back to Pamela Villarreal after we have this short break, and we're going to continue to talk about how we can have the right type of fiscal policies for economic growth in the United States of America. This is Colonel Alan West, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, religious liberty is one of the foundations of America, and it is a right enshrined in the First Amendment. But Mary Eberstadt is concerned about the widespread discrimination in today's secular society. She explains why in her book it's dangerous to believe religious freedom in its enemies. Her book begins with the many stories that I have presented in various commentaries and that we often discuss on radio each week with Kelly Shackelford of First Liberty. Then she goes on to explain how Christians can respond to critics by holding them to standards they supposedly accept. Two examples show why Christians need to be concerned about this trend and need to learn how to respond. First, there is the sad story of Mozilla CEO Brendan Eich, who was hounded out of his position merely because he supported Proposition 8 in 2008 in California. Mary Eberstadt made the point that if someone this important and powerful could be forced out of a business, what chance do the rest of us have? The second example is Michael Lindsay, president of Gordon College in Massachusetts. He and 14 other Christians signed a letter asking for a religious exemption to the president's planned executive order banning sexual orientation discrimination by federal contractors. It's worth mentioning that even Senator Elizabeth Warren supported a religious exemption in such cases. The city of Salem suspended a long-term contract with Gordon. The Lynn School Committee ended its relationship with the college and refused to accept Gordon College students as student teachers. Then the New England Association of Schools and Colleges announced that it was going to consider whether the college violated their standards for accreditation. It is easy to see the irony. 3 centuries after the original Salem witch trials, Gordon College was subjected to a secularist witch trial. This is why Christians need to understand what is happening and take a bold stand for religious liberty. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Betrayal, slavery, revenge, redemption. Ben-Hur, in theaters Friday, from Paramount Pictures, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View Radio. Colonel Alan West, Executive Director, National Center for Policy Analysis, guest hosting for Kirby, who's on vacation in upstate New York. Let's get back to our conversation with NCPA Senior Fellow for Tax and Entitlement Policy, Pamela Villarreal. Pamela, thanks for coming back with us on this second portion of this segment.
Well, you're welcome.
You know, we ended up talking about an economy that works for all, and we looked at the tax brackets and the personal income tax side, and you talked about some of the effects on small business. When you think about these past 3 economic quarters, I mean, we have an anemic gross domestic product growth, GDP growth. I mean, barely, about 1%. Which of these 2 tax plans do you think, in your assessment and your analysis and expertise, will help us as far as our small business development and growth and get our GDP kicking along a lot better?
Well, I would have to say the Trump plan for the main reason that it would reduce the income tax rates, but also he is proposing a 15% corporate tax rate and a 15% pass-through rate. Oftentimes, people who own businesses will either pay the corporate tax or a pass-through tax, depending on which is lower. But if you make both of the tax rates the same, then government doesn't have a preferential treatment for one over the other. Hillary has scoffed at having a 15% rate for corporations. But what people often fail to realize is when we have a high corporate tax rate, either
the highest in the world, if I'm correct.
Exactly, 35%. When we have that high rate, whether it's being paid by a large, like multi-million-dollar firm, or if it's being paid by a smaller company, those taxes are actually paid through passed on to the workers through the form of reduced wages. So having a much lower corporate tax rate would make us very competitive with the rest of the world, but it would also help to boost wages in this country. Trump is also proposing a 10% repatriation tax for the roughly $2 trillion we have parked overseas in unrepatriated earnings. So that would be a huge boost to GDP if corporations had the chance to bring that money back here and reinvest it without being hit with a 35% rate.
It's interesting because the highest corporate business tax rate at the federal government side is 35%. Then, the various states can have anywhere from 4 to 6%.
Sure.
And think about that. Now, what is funny is when you have a tax policy that forces your corporations and businesses to leave, I read that Hillary Clinton wants to institute an exit tax. So in other words, we will have this onerous tax policy for corporations and businesses. And if you decide that you want to try to leave the United States of America to survive, we're going to tax you for doing that.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because Obama, under the Treasury rules, has tried to institute punishments for companies that reincorporate overseas, essentially leaving the United States through these rules on inversions.
Corporate inversions, yeah.
But the problem with punishing these companies for doing that is what you're going to do is send a message to anybody in the future, well, you better not start a business in the United States, because if you decide you're going to expand or move to another country, you're going to be punished. So what it really does is it sends a signal and
it disincentivizes, correct?
To potential future entrepreneurs to not start a business in the United States. It's really pretty frightening.
And that's why we see our initial public offerings, I think, going in the wrong direction. Let's shift over and talk about another, I think, interesting contrast between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. That's the estate tax. Kind of give us your assessment on that.
Well, Donald Trump wants to basically repeal the estate tax. Hillary Clinton wants to raise the top marginal rate of the estate tax to 45%. It's currently 40%. And she also wants to lower the exemptions for estates that can be set aside and not have to pay the tax. The problem with this, and NCPA has done a number of studies on this, is we often think of the estate tax as being for the very wealthy, and they should have to pay it because somebody dies, the patriarchy, and then they leave it to their son. But really, there are many small businesses that get hit with the estate tax. If you happen to be a Christmas tree farm in Mississippi and you are very land rich but cash poor, if the owner of the farm dies and passes the farm on to his children, they could be hit with the estate tax, meaning they would have to sell part of the land in order to pay the tax, or they would have to reduce the size of the business. It doesn't just hit the very wealthy, it actually hits some small businesses as well that have lots of assets that would be considered non-cash assets.
Well, it's interesting because even Hillary Clinton said in her speech last week in Michigan that this only, the estate tax only affects 2%. And of course, everyone puts the picture of, Paris Hilton out there. No one ever talks about, again, the disincentivizing of trying to grow and pass something on to, subsequent generations.
And Hillary claims to be for the poor and for the vulnerable and for the working
remember,
person.
she left the White House and she was really broke. They were dead broke.
But I will say this. The thing about the estate tax, too, is the people that end up paying it are the people that weren't able to plan for it. Much of the time, the wealthy are able to shield their assets from the estate tax through, very intricate planning and using estate lawyers and so on and so forth. The average Christmas tree farm in Mississippi, they don't have the resources to plan to bypass the estate tax, so they get hit with it.
We can go on talking about capital gains tax, dividends tax all ad nauseum, ad infinitum, but I want to transition to, I think, something that's very important when we look at what's happening in Milwaukee. Pamela, how do we get economic growth? How do we stimulate small business entrepreneurship in these inner cities where we see such a lack of opportunity?
Well, a couple of very important things to do in these cities is, and Donald Trump has mentioned this at the federal level, we need to reduce the regulatory burden. The federal government is known for its regulatory burden, but even state and local governments impose some huge regulations on people that want to go into an area and start their own business. Whether they want to be, you have a young woman that wants to be a hair braider, or you have a person that wants to drive a cab or be an Uber driver. There's a lot of protectionism going on. So these areas, not only are they could they be overrun with crime, which causes people not to want to go into them and start their business, but also you might have a very highly regulatory city, whether it be Milwaukee or Chicago or any other area, that really makes it hard and makes it very expensive for your average person to go in and start their business.
Let's think about this. Back, Art Laffer and the former, deceased Congressman Jack Kemp talked about urban economic empowerment zones. Can you explain for the listening audience, what do these urban economic empowerment zones, your understanding and concept of them?
Well, the urban economic empowerment zones are basically areas where you have, if somebody comes in with and wants to build, or maybe they want to revitalize an area that's a brownfield, they get special tax credits for doing that. There have been some mixed results on those. Some studies show that they are very effective at bringing economic growth back. However, one thing that has to be coupled with economic empowerment zones is also just a sense of law and order. So it's really important in these areas that you have a council of a city council and a law enforcement that's willing to protect these businesses from crime. If they feel like that they're going to run the risk of having their store looted or burned down or whatever, they're not going to invest there, even if you do provide them the tax incentives to do so.
Pam, if there is one sentence you could convey to our voters as we go into this election cycle when it comes to tax, policy, economic growth, what's that one sentence?
Well, I would just say that when you are looking at candidates to pick from, you probably want to look at the one that's going to work the hardest at getting government out of the way, whether it's through fewer taxes, less regulation. That's the only way that we're going to grow our economy.
Well, Pamela Villarreal, the Senior Fellow, National Center for Policy Analysis on Tax and Entitlement Policy, want to thank you so much. And again, we wish you all the best and prayers for the recovery from your surgery.
Well, thank you, Alan, for having me.
Thanks, Pam. Alan West here, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson at Point of View Radio. And one of the great things about Point of View, it is supported by your donations. And we want to make sure that we can continue to give you this great type of programming so that you can be a better educated and better informed citizen of this great constitutional republic, because that is what it takes to keep it. When we come back from this break, we will have Pastor Todd Wagner of Watermark Community Church.
A prince, falsely accused of treason, separated from his family and the woman he loves, forced into slavery. He returns home seeking revenge, but instead finds redemption. It's Brother Against Brother in Ben-Hur with Academy Award winner Morgan Freeman.
If your brother is the pride of Rome, defeat him and you'll defeat an empire. Then you will have your vengeance.
Ben-Hur, in theaters Friday from Paramount Pictures, rated PG-13. $5 doesn't buy much anymore, but $5 can change hearts and a nation. The 2016 presidential election has been very divisive, so what is a Christian to do? Kirby Anderson and the team at Point of View Radio will be here each day on the road to November, and your $5 investment will make a difference. You want to do more? Fine, do it, but please stop what you're doing and at least give us $5. Visit pointofview.net, look for the Donate Now button, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or send your gift to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Colonel Alan West here, guest hosting Point of View Radio. Kirby Anderson is on vacation up in upstate New York. You know, millions of Christians did not vote in the 2012 election cycle, and I know that Kirby has really been harping on this issue. So I have someone here because I think it's important we talk about the role of evangelical Christians in this constitutional republic that we've been blessed with, that we call America. And Pastor Todd Wagner is the founding pastor of Watermark Community Church in Dallas, Texas. The church was established over a decade ago by a handful of friends who were burdened to make the invisible kingdom visible to their spiritually confused and compromised friends in their city. Watermark's mission as the local body of Christ is to reach the unchurched, de-churched, dead churched, and unmoved, and call others to believe in Christ, belong to his body, be trained in truth, and be strong in ministry. Today, Watermark has campuses in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Plano, and is working around the world by serving, training, and encouraging indigenous leaders in numerous countries to radically embrace the adventure of being fully devoted followers of Christ in their cultural context. In addition, Todd leads the Life Center, which is an initiative to create a world-class museum dedicated to honoring human life, to ending abortion, and advancing a society that embodies human dignity. Todd's first book, Come and See with David C. Cook, publishers, will be released in the spring of 2017. Todd and his wife, Alex, are busy investing in their 6 kids. Be fruitful and multiply. Although he enjoys teaching at both Watermark and the conferences around the country, his favorite pastime is laughing with his family and coaching sports for his kids and their friends. And Pastor Wagner is my pastor here in Dallas, Texas. Pastor Todd Wagner, thank you for taking the time to be with us here.
Alan, it is a privilege. I am glad we're together over the phone, and it's great to hear your voice.
Well, thank you so much. Hey, let's get right to this thing. You know, what can we do to make sure that, you know, Christ's body, the Christians here, become engaged and involved in the political, you know, aspect of this country as far as its governance and righteous governance?
Well, I think the first thing we do is encourage them, right? And so many people have this high-minded view that if I'm going to be about the gospel, and boy, we ought to be about the gospel, Christ and everything that is central and important to that. And I couldn't agree more. But the gospel has implications. The gospel has legs. And I think one of the jobs that we have as believers is to help other believers understand that part of our being agents of grace, personal need for redemption, but our responsibility to fulfill what is, frankly, a scriptural mandate which exists even before the Great Commission, which is to go and make disciples. And that's a cultural commission, which shows up all the way back there in Genesis 1, where we are to give leadership to rule, to subdue the world that we're in, and to bring it about, to create a kingdom in such a way that's going to be a blessing to people. So we work to seek the welfare, to use Jeremiah's words, of the city in which we live, but not to impose our standard, but to propose a better way. So I think we need to give people permission that as a believer, it is a high-minded and godly thing to do to care about citizenry and citizenship.
You know, my favorite character out of the Bible is, without a doubt, Joshua. I think if Joshua were alive today, he'd either be a Marine or a paratrooper because he was just a fighter. And in that first chapter of Joshua, you know, God tells him to be strong and courageous, tells him 3 times. And he tells him that, you know, this book of the law that I gave to Moses, meditate upon it day and night. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left. You'll have success and prosperity wherever you go. I think one of the important things we also need to do as the Christian community is meditate on the Constitution, to understand it and turn not from it for the right or to the left, and we will have success and prosperity. And if we don't do that, look at what is happening with religious freedom and also this, you know, perverted definition of the concept of separation of church and state. You know, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about that perverted definition of separation of church and state. As you know, and I'm sure this audience specifically, because Kirby does such a great job, is well educated. That was a letter from Jefferson to the Dansbury Baptists that were concerned in a congregational estate that there was going to be laws that were made that were going to keep them from Baptists and practicing the faith as they understood God wanted them to do it. And that's where Jefferson wrote those famous lines that have come to mean to too many people that religion, if you will, matters of faith should have nothing to do with governance, when in fact It was just the opposite that was intended, that governance should do nothing to dictate or influence the way people practice matters of faith. So when we talk about the separation of church and state, what we really mean is state shouldn't influence church. And it's the church's job to understand that we should not put our hope in the state. As my friend Chuck Colson used to always say, our hope doesn't ride on Air Force One, but we do have responsibilities, okay, to help people that are going to be in positions of administration and leadership are people concerned with justice. And we don't define justice based on what the tide of the day is, or the esprit de corps. It's what God says, because God loves us and God has our best interests in mind.
That you're spot on. And what I see happening is, we have allowed language to be altered and language to be redefined. And that first liberty, that first right that we have is freedom of religion there in our Bill of Rights and the Constitution. It was so important. So how do we retake this message? How do we get the conversation changed and take this language back? Because I am really concerned of the 1954, Johnson Amendment and the effect that it's had upon, pastors.
Yeah, I think a lot of pastors are incredibly intimidated. I think two things. First of all, they're concerned that they might lose their tax status. What I would say is I would always be concerned that you lose your theological responsibility first, okay? And then we'll worry about our tax status secondly. But what I would say is, we're not talking about necessarily even, because there's another step, having to endorse a particular and personal candidate from a pulpit or from a position where a nonprofit, as a leader or as an organization, a leader of a nonprofit. Pastors are allowed to have political positions. In fact, by Scripture, I think they're commanded to. Whether or not they should use their pulpit to say, vote for this candidate, not this, I don't lose much sleep over that, but I do think they should use their pulpit to help people understand the implications of theology and Scripture on the kinds of ways they should vote and on the issues that God cares about. And so when you do that, then it makes it very easy for people to go, okay, what candidates believe in what? And for instance, even with the Johnson Amendment in place, you are allowed to distribute voters' guides that are nonpartisan that give people information. So if you teach people on what information God cares about because he loves people, and then you show people what candidates care about, you've already done that without even violating the Johnson Amendment. I think a bigger problem, though, Colonel, is that pastors think when they're talking about these pragmatic issues that they're somehow not doing their job because they're leaving the gospel. And again, I just keep coming back to my pastor friends and saying, guys, the gospel has implications, and if we don't preach the implications, we are not leading the people we should, and we're not teaching them what the Scripture tells us to in the Great Commission, which is to teach them all that I have commanded you. Yeah. Not just how to get saved, but what saved people look like. And especially as you do a great job of talking about in a democratic republic like we have, where citizenry is given responsibility to delegate its authority to others. We better delegate it well.
That's true. Now, I would tell you, I've got two daughters, 23 and 20, and we were recommended when we moved here from South Florida to come to your church, and they fell in love with it. And when I go to Watermark, I am absolutely floored by the amount of millennials you have there. What is the winning message? Because you are winning that cultural war there at Watermark by drawing these young people to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I mean, how are you doing that?
Well, I think millennials want to stand for something. I think they care. The last thing they want to do is just go someplace and told, hey, be polite, behave, show back up here next week, listen to us talk, and let's maintain the status quo. When you're young, you believe you can change the world, and you want to change the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, there's not a better message for you or a better radical leader for you than Jesus Christ. And then we just love them enough to say, look, guys, we're not going to love you more if you agree with us, but we're going to make a case that this is where life is. If there's another thing that a 20-year-old wants to experience, it's life. Yeah. And so we just tell them, man, here's life indeed. And here's what God says. Here's why he says it. He's not trying to rip you off. He's trying to set you free. And when you have an honest, intellectual conversation and you create a vision that is rooted in truth, I think millennials are going to always respond to it. I think humankind responds to it. I think what most millennials are doing, the increasing nunners, as media loves to make a big deal about, and they should. That category is growing. I think the reason so many millennials are losing heart in the church is because the church hasn't been Christ's church in this country by and large for a long time. When they find people who stand for something and believe in something, and they communicate about it in love and with intellectual integrity, and also can say, follow me, because they're doing it themselves, they're looking for mentors. They're looking for leaders that they can
That's
follow and believe
formula.
in. They can shape them.
That's a winning formula. You know, my mother used to say a man must stand for something or else he'll fall for anything. Hey, last quick question I got to ask you. Are you going to see Ben-Hur this weekend?
You know what? I am. I'll probably try and pick it up with my kids. You know, it's funny. I tried to get them to watch the old one with me a few times, and we started it and had a good time. We've watched it and listened to it on audio cassette, and I think it makes sense to go support movies like that when they come out. I have no idea. I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen it yet?
No,
Carol?
I haven't, but I just hope they stick to that line of faith. And, you know, I got to tell you, speaking of faith, thank you for all you do at Watermark. Pastor Todd Wagner, thank you for being here with us.
Hey, I'm grateful for you. Have a great day.
You too. I'll be back after the break.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Colonel Alan West guest hosting here at Point of View Radio. My dear friend Kirby Anderson is upstate New York taking a little vacation. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you. And I want to remind you, 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212, the call-in number for us here at Point of View Radio, where we would love to hear your thoughts, perspectives, and insights on the topics for today that we have covered. We started off talking about our economic situation and the comparison between the policies that have been put forth between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. We just had a great segment with Pastor Todd Wagner talking about how we cannot allow the Christian community to, not become fully engaged and not become tricked into believing that separation of church and state means that we separate our Judeo-Christian faith heritage from who we are in this constitutional republic, and how we should seek out to ensure we have good and righteous governance for these great United States of America. But now I want to take just some time, and again, we'll have Dr. David Grantham coming up in our following 30 minutes from the top of the hour to the bottom of the hour to talk about a lot of national security foreign policy issues that are out there. And then we'll close up in the final half hour with your calls. But I think that we need to have a conversation on something that is very troubling when we look at what is going on in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I grew up in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, a neighborhood called the Old Fourth Ward. And it's the exact same neighborhood that produced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As a matter of fact, my elementary school, Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic School, was right across the street from Ebenezer Baptist Church. And if you had a real good leg when we used to play kickball and you could get the ball over the back wall of our playground there, that ball would end up in the backyard of the house that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born and raised in. That had an incredible effect upon me, growing up. And when I think about, being born in 1961 and what the black community there in Atlanta, Georgia looked like, and the black communities all across the United States of America look like, we've got a serious problem. When we think about, some 50 plus years ago, when the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson came out, when we basically took the inner city communities and instead of preaching the sense of being victors and being triumphant in your own lives, we created more victims. When the policies came out about the out of wedlock, children and the government providing a check, and as long as you did not have a man in the home, look at what we have today. Once upon a time in the inner city community, in the black community, the two-parent household was between 75 to 77%. Today it's at 24%. And you even had the father of the young man who was killed by the police officer, a young man who had a criminal record, a young man who disobeyed a law enforcement officer and did not drop the weapon that he had, and the law enforcement officer took the right response. That father even said that he set a poor example, that he wasn't there for his son, that he was out in the streets and he did not do as a good father should have done. If we do not restore that sense of family, if we do not restore that which was the foundation of the inner city community, the black community especially, mothers and fathers in the home that trained up the children as the way they should go so that when they grew old, they would not depart from it. And that's scripture. That's out of Proverbs. That's from the words of Solomon. And look at where we are today. If we continue down the path where we have seen some 13 to 15 million black babies that have been aborted since Roe versus Wade, that is genocidal. But no one wants to talk about that. When you read some of the writings and sayings of Margaret Sanger, who is the founder of Planned Parenthood, why aren't we discussing that? It is really racist in nature, some of the things that she said, referring to some people as undesirables. But yet we don't have those serious, hard conversations. And so when I hear this group called Black Lives Matter that is out there, I really question them as far as their credibility, because before the shooting of this individual in Milwaukee, previously there were some 9 or 10 shootings and 5 deaths. In Chicago this past weekend, there were 52 shootings and 9 deaths. Chicago has in the time period that President Obama has been the president, and that's his hometown, Chicago has had more shooting deaths than we have seen in Afghanistan, a combat zone. Where are the voices of Black Lives Matter when it comes to that? Where are they talking about the abortion, the killing of innocent lives, lives that will never know the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Where are these people, these black leaders, the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, the NAACP, the National Urban League, all of these others, the Congressional Black Caucus? When you look at these failing public schools that occupy the inner city. See, my parents understood that they had a responsibility to make the right choice for me to get a quality education, because they knew that was the great equalizer, because with a quality education, it's about the equality of opportunity, not someone coming along with the equality of outcomes. And so they made a choice to send me to that small black Catholic school, which unfortunately, because of a lack of support, no longer exists today in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so how many children in the old Fourth Ward will not have that education opportunity to rise above, to become a victor, not a victim. So where are the voices that are talking about charter schools and school choice and school vouchers, better education opportunities, enabling parents to make the choices that my parents made for me? Where are those voices? Don't those lives matter? The better educated inner city kid? Where are the people that are talking about the horrific situation with black teenage unemployment in the United States of America, which when you look at the numbers, it is absolutely horrific. And even in the black community, unemployment is double the average. And if you really believe that the unemployment in the United States of America is at 4.9 or 4.8%, I got some really good farmland to sell you down in South Florida, just west of Fort Lauderdale. People, we need to have the real conversations, especially about our inner city, about the breakdown of the family, about restoring the family, about respecting life, about making sure that we are providing the education opportunities for people to be able to go out and be a part of the American dream, for them to be able to go out and pursue their happiness. We need to let people know that man, through government, cannot guarantee your happiness, which is the message that we hear people continue to say. It's about time we stop creating more victims, especially in the inner city. It's about time that we look to the inner city and talk about how we can increase small business growth and development. How do we inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs? And if you want to say that this is a party thing, it is not a party thing. It's a principle thing. It's a foundational values thing. Because my parents were registered Democrats. My parents campaigned for John Lewis, the great civil rights leader. Where is he and his voice today? Because what we see is the creation of a new 21st century economic plantation. We don't see economic empowerment in the inner cities. We see economic enslavement. And to me, it's even worse than physical change because it destroys drive, determination. See, my parents, and I said that plural, parents, they brought me up understanding the importance of faith, the importance of family, the importance of individual responsibility. You know, when my parents wanted a new car, I never saw them go down anything. And that's how they raised me, to go out and work hard and achieve and get my own. It was about education in our household and our family. So today, their son, their middle son, Alan, can sit here before you all on this incredible radio station. 2 master's degrees. In college, bachelor degrees in marketing and finance, an MBA and a PhD. Guess what? In December of this year, our oldest daughter is going to graduate with her master's from SMU. That's what parents can do. They inculcate, they instill the right type of values. They tell their children that they can achieve because they set the example. And when we don't have that happening, we don't want to have these hard discussions, when we don't want to tell the truth, when we have people that are going out there being part of a politicized movement such as Black Lives Matter, this is what we get in our inner cities. The only way it changes is that we change and we get involved and we start having the hard conversations. And one of the great things about Point of View Radio, support it so we can continue to have the conversation. Alan West in here for Kirby Anderson. We'll be right back with more Point of View Radio.
You can change your mood with a cup of coffee, or you can change our future. Point of View listeners have started ministries. They've run for Congress and won. They've become produce. What if you give more? This is a pivotal moment in America's history, and your investment in Point of View can change a life and change America, but only if you give. Visit pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151, or send at least $5 to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. A prince, falsely accused of treason, separated from his family and the woman he loves, forced into slavery. He returns home seeking revenge, but instead finds redemption. It's Brother Against Brother in Ben-Hur with Academy Award winner Morgan Freeman.
If your brother is the pride of Rome, defeat him and you'll defeat an empire. Then you will have your vengeance.
Ben-Hur, in theaters Friday from Paramount Pictures, rated PG-13. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Welcome back. Second hour of Point of View Radio today on this Wednesday, a rainy Wednesday in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's pretty weird having grass still being green in the month of August out here in Dallas, Texas, but I'll take that any day. And thoughts and prayers go out to the people down in Louisiana who are suffering from the rains and the flooding that is happening there. Colonel Alan West here, Executive Director of the National Center for Policy Analysis, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson, who is away on a vacation in upstate New York. Our caller line is 800-531-1212, 800-531-1212, and we're going to dedicate that entire last half hour to answering your phone calls and hearing your thoughts, perspectives, and insights. But right now we want to talk with Dr. David Grantham, who is a Ph.D., leading expert in national security matters and international affairs with specializations in Latin America and the Middle East. Dr. Grantham's expertise engages the nation's most pressing issues like terrorism, international security, and military affairs. Dr. Grantham's research offers timely solutions on problems ranging from defense spending and personnel management to terrorist finance and regional security strategies. His work has been featured in a variety of academic journals and media outlets, and he speaks on these issues to audience nationwide. Prior to his work as a senior fellow at the National Center for Policy Analysis, Dr. Grantham served as an officer in the United States Air Force and as a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And the real thing that I don't like was that he got to wear a beard over there in the combat zone. I had to always shave. While on active duty, Dr. Grantham conducted and managed counterintelligence and counter-terrorism investigation and operations, both stateside and abroad. Dr. Grantham led efforts in areas of anti-terrorism, cyber defense, and foreign espionage, and deployed twice to Afghanistan and Iraq in support of Air Force Office of Special Investigations, OSI, operations. Dr. Grantham holds a Ph.D. in modern history from Texas Christian University and a Master's of Science in International Relations from Troy University. He earned his Bachelor of Art in History from the University of South Florida in 2004. Dr. Grantham, good to be with you again.
Thank you. That sounds like a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. Now, okay, we're already short on this first segment. We got 6 minutes to go. Let's talk about the Trump national security foreign policy speech that was done just Monday evening. What did you see? Were you pleased with it? What could have been better? What's your assessment?
I would say my assessment is lukewarm. I think the first one of the good things he addressed, I believe, was the focus on radical Islam and the threat posed by radical Islam. But his leading into the speech involved more of a laundry list of terrorist acts, which at this point we're well aware of. So I thought there could have been more substance given to how we're going to do that. And there was one area that it mentioned a committee on radical Islam, and I'm going to focus on that for a second, that while I think you and I would agree another government committee is probably unnecessary, to say the least, I think spoke to something that needs to happen, which is refocusing government-wide efforts on radical Islam and the threat posed. But I think there needs to be a much more robust examination of how that committee is executed or what their authority is. So, for example, if we're going to have a committee of 6 people, they should be moved from somewhere else in the government. Or if we're going to have to hire someone, maybe we cut positions elsewhere. But the idea that we need another committee was not welcomed, but I could appreciate the theme at which he was trying to.
Well, the thing I see it as, that's the job of the National Security Council.
Right.
The president, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor. What we have seen happen is that the influence of the Council for American Islamic Relations has caused a purging of a lot of these discussions, the training and what have you between the Department of Defense and even the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So you're right. I'm not in for another committee, or anything else. Just do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think the resources are in place.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about, his focus, do you think he was too narrow in just focusing on the Islamic State, or do you think he did a good job focusing on what I call the global Islamic jihad?
Again, there's always room for improvement, I think, and I appreciated his focus, but yes, I think there could have been a bit broader understanding of the implications or the connections, because ISIS, the global Islamic Jihad movement, those things don't happen in a vacuum. And I think at some points he touched on it. For example, reaching out to some of our counterparts in the Middle East, the Prime Minister of Jordan, President Sisi in Egypt. There's partners that we can approach that see Islamic Jihad as a threat, similar to the way America does. So I appreciate his touching on that, but I think there was more. He could have spent more time on those things versus the laundry list of attacks that have occurred over the last year, which is helpful. It sets the tone, but a lot of his speech, I think, was taken up with that.
If you could, give him some advice going forward, from that strategic level, that strategic perspective on dealing with, the counterterrorism, especially in counter and intelligence operation. We'll talk a little bit more about intelligence in the next segment. But what would you offer to, a Trump campaign team?
I think the first thing I would say is we need to focus on a comprehensive strategy. And that seems trite, but I believe there is a need for a comprehensive strategy, one that addresses in detail, and you begin with this, you lead with, this is going to address finance, cyber, and everyone connected to and supporting these radical Islamist groups. Iran being probably the first glaring example, and then those that support Iran are those that are financing Iran, which unfortunately with this ransom payment, it's hard to say that the United States hasn't in some ways participated in that. But I think he needs to, I would recommend, he's saying the right things, but it strikes me as disconnected. And I think a more comprehensive understanding and something that while it's comprehensive, it's also something that the American public can digest. So it needs to be both. But I think while it seems a basic step, there needs to be a better understanding of what does a comprehensive strategy look like. And then I would also say he needs to answer the question immediately, what does success look like?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that, a Hillary Clinton presidency is just a continuation of the current policies, or do you think she'll do anything different?
I think she'll do different. Whether it will be useful is the question. But I think there is enough, I don't know if rivalry is the right word, but I think she wants to put her stamp on this, and I think there'll be a change. Whether that change is helpful or useful, that's hard to say, because I think at the end of the day, the current administration and the Clinton administration probably have the same ideological bent that won't change the outcome. So it may change the strategy, though.
We've got about 40 seconds in this segment. What can we do to get the social media, sites, the Facebook and the Twitter and everything, to deny enemy access to those platforms?
I think Carly Fiorina said it great during one of the debates where she says the government needs to have deep and thoughtful conversations with the private sector. Often the response is, we need laws, we need new regulations, we need to do. First step is we need to have a dialogue, a serious dialogue. And I think from there we'll be able to determine a way forward. But first step is really the government needs to get out of its own way and go talk to the private sector.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Grantham, we're going to come back and talk more about Russia's influence in the Middle East and also intelligence systems and gathering. Alan West, guest hosting Point of View Radio.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, religious liberty is one of the foundations of America, and it is a right enshrined in the First Amendment. But Mary Eberstadt is concerned about the widespread discrimination in today's secular society. She explains why in her book it's dangerous to believe religious freedom in its enemies. Her book begins with the many stories that I have presented in various commentaries and that we often discuss on radio each week with Kelly Shackelford of First Liberty. Then she goes on to explain how Christians can respond to critics by holding them to standards they supposedly accept. Two examples show why Christians need to be concerned about this trend and need to learn how to respond. First, there is the sad story of Mozilla CEO Brendan Eich, who was hounded out of his position merely because he supported Proposition 8 in 2008 in California. Mary Eberstadt made the point that if someone this important and powerful could be forced out of a business, what chance do the rest of us have? The second example is Michael Lindsay, president of Gordon College in Massachusetts. He and 14 other Christians signed a letter asking for a religious exemption to the president's planned executive order banning sexual orientation discrimination by federal contractors. It's worth mentioning that even Senator Elizabeth Warren supported a religious exemption in such cases. The city of Salem suspended a long-term contract with Gordon. The Lynn School Committee ended its relationship with the college and refused to accept Gordon College students as student teachers. Then the New England Association of Schools and Colleges announced that it was going to consider whether the college violated their standards for accreditation. It is easy to see the irony. 3 centuries after the original Salem witch trials, Gordon College was subjected to a secularist witch trial. This is why Christians need to understand what is happening and take a bold stand for religious liberty. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Betrayal, slavery, revenge, redemption. Ben-Hur, in theaters Friday, from Paramount Pictures, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Colonel Alan West back here, Point of View Radio. If you did not catch it on camera, Kirby Anderson's daughter came in here and scolded me because I suffer from a lack of intelligence, and I juxtaposed the call-in number. It is 1-800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. I think Kirby called her and said, find something this guy's doing wrong. He cannot continue to do this good on my show. But she's a good daughter. She came in and scolded me. I consider myself scolded. Thank you, Catherine. I am not perfect. I am a man, son of Adam. But anyhow, let's get back to this topic here, because this is something that is very much so on the forefront of the minds of the American people. You know, our national security. It's right up there with the economy and, you know, how do we get Americans back to work? And we're joined with our senior fellow for national security and foreign policy at the National Center for Policy Analysis, Dr. David Grantham. And what I want to talk about now in this segment, David, is we are seeing an incredible encroachment, incursion, invasion, whatever you want to call it, of Russia establishing itself in the Middle East, you know, filling the vacuum that the United States of America has created. I mean, we wake up today and we find out that Russia is actually launching their airstrikes into Syria from Iran. Maybe they're, you know, what helped them out is the $400 million that we just gave them to improve the runways. But what is your assessment of what you see happening with Russia's involvement in the Middle East with Iran, which is the number one state sponsor of Islamic terrorism?
I think we're seeing a marriage of convenience right now. And Russia has long, since the Cold War, has wanted to have a foothold in the Middle East, primarily for energy reasons and access to waterways, Persian Gulf, etc. So my assessment or my thought watching this is it's frightening to think that Russia could have that kind of foothold in the Middle East. They're ones that do not give up easy, as we saw in the Cold War, and they don't merely have alliances or whatever the other nice word for that is. They essentially have blocks. Mm-hmm. So watching Russia move into the Middle East is frightening, to say the least, if not just for trade, for energy, for all types of just global commerce, for more of a security issue. When we look at our ally in Israel sitting right nearby, when you have a power like Russia that's backing up the kind of despotic and tyrannical minds in Iran, that has to frighten anyone.
You know, it's amazing because you are seeing more world leaders go and visit Vladimir Putin than they are coming here to the United States of America right now. Case in point, it was just a week or so ago that when you talk about marriage of convenience, you know, Turkey's president, Erdogan, just visited Vladimir Putin. And you think about, here is a president, Erdogan, who just, you know, survived and, you know, crushed this little coup attempt. But how funny it is that, you know, we know that Erdogan has been somewhat supporting the Sunni insurgencies against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. It was Turkey who shot down a Russian aircraft. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden they're sitting down and they're talking.
Truth is stranger than fiction when you watch the developments in the Middle East. And I think you're dead on that the attention Putin is receiving from all these different presidents, prime ministers, should show you something, should tell us all that the power has shifted because the attention has shifted. Mm-hmm. Netanyahu, from what I understand, just reading different reports, he seems to be on the phone with Putin on a weekly basis, mm-hmm. trying to discern, why are you meeting with the Turkish president? Why are you doing this in Iran? And so, again, I go back to this idea of the Russian mindset that they're not going in to make friends. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a strategic foothold, and they're not going to let that go. So we could be seeing a new Cold War, if you will, developing.
Well, absolutely. I mean, here's a guy, Vladimir Putin, that said his greatest disappointment of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so now, with the billions of dollars that the United States have allowed to flow back into Iran, the lifting of sanctions, you know, Iran is talking about buying the S-300. Mm-hmm. Anti-aircraft missile system, which all of a sudden, if that system is deployed into Syria, that has huge ramifications for Israel, because we know the Quds Force, which is the terrorist organization, Hezbollah, which is declared a terrorist organization, they are operating, you know, freely and openly in Syria. So again, you know, how is it that we have gone in 7.5 years to this incredible, you know, state of existence in the Middle East where we're not even a byproduct. We're not even considered as the United States of America. What do the Kurds do? What does Jordan do, as you said? Egypt. What does Israel do?
They're you know, that's a good question, because they're calling Vladimir Putin to try to figure it out. And I think one area that we can begin to reclaim some of this is in the area of intelligence, and mm-hmm. we've seen several reports come out lately, one of them being that the investigation into the so-called cooking of the books mm-hmm. at CENTCOM with some of this analysis regarding ISIS was, you know, softened, if you will, at somewhere along the lines. And I think aside from a administration who has a philosophy, already had an apology tour in Egypt, so there's a philosophy that America exiting is somehow going to be beneficial for everyone else. Mm-hmm. But the other part is the intelligence and the fact that we don't have the right information coming into the administration. We don't have the American public knowing the right information. So therefore, even if we wanted to respond, I don't know that we can effectively, because we frankly don't have a good idea of what's going on.
You know, you bring up a great point, and there's a great transition. If we get to the point where our intelligence gathering and reporting becomes politicized and we can't even trust that, how dangerous that is for the warfighter on the battlefield.
It's incredibly dangerous. In fact, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and I tried to distinguish between often the reaction to American intelligence is the fear that they're going to spy on Americans. That becomes the dividing line. And what I tried to explain was, I said, yes, that's a a fear, and that should be a legitimate fear. However, the real fear is when it becomes politicized and it becomes useless. So it's one thing if they're not spying on us or spying on us, but when it becomes useless because the information is just incorrect and it's become politicized and decisions are made based on wrong intelligence, it puts our warfighter obviously at extreme risk, because then they're entering the fray or into a situation where we don't have the right information. It could be anything from missiles to troop levels to Russian bases that are popping up in Iran, or they're using Iranian bases.
It is funny because I was listening to the State Department spokesperson respond to this quote unquote revelation that the Russians are using Iranian bases. And they actually said that they were caught surprised, or caught, basically caught with their pants down. How can it be that, the United States of America would not know that Russian aircraft are taking off from Iranian bases to go and conduct bombing and strikes in Syria?
Well, I go back to my days in OSI, and one of the great techniques that defense attorneys like to do to investigators when we're on the stand is they find a mistake and they say, either you made this mistake because you're careless or you did it on purpose. Either way, it's bad. Mm-hmm. And I look at that speech and that surprise, and I say, either you didn't know because there's a level of incompetence in the intelligence coming through, or you're just hiding from the American public that you did know, and now you've just
oops is out of the bag.
Oops is out. Yeah. So either one's bad, and I can't imagine there's a good way to say we didn't know. So either you're not telling the truth or you are telling the truth.
Yeah.
In either situation, it's bad.
Quickly, how bad is our intelligence gathering apparatus right now in your assessment?
Gosh, if it was a 1 to 10, I would say it's probably at a 6 functionally. If you add the political element, you're probably dragging it down to a 4 or 3. So when I say functionally, I mean what they're able to execute. Right now we're focusing a lot on cyber, a lot on satellites. We really need to get back to human intelligence. Yeah. We need people on the ground who are friends with these people, who can get the information firsthand.
Well, that's going to be kind of hard to do when the man who fingered Osama bin Laden is sitting in a jail in Pakistan, and we know that the Iranian nuclear scientist that was helping us out was just recently had a noose put around his neck and is dead.
Exactly.
Dr. David Grantham, Senior Fellow, National Center for Policy Analysis, National Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
You got it. Hey, folks, again, the conversation that we're having here and the program that we're having here is so important. So we want to make sure that you're supporting Point of View Radio and the great work that this crew does here, along with my good friend Kirby Anderson, and the ability for someone like myself to come and share thoughts, perspectives, and insights. So please, go to that donate button that you see at the website for Point of View and send in just a few little dollars here, because we have to make sure that all of this information is getting to you. Because as we just talked about intelligence, we don't have a republic if we don't have intelligent voting citizens. Alan West with you, guest hosting Point of View Radio. When we come back, it's all about your calls. Please call in.
A prince, falsely accused of treason, separated from his family and the woman he loves, forced into slavery. He returns home seeking revenge, but instead finds redemption. It's brother against brother in Ben-Hur with Academy Award winner Morgan Freeman.
If your brother is the pride of Rome, defeat him and you'll defeat an empire. Then you will have your vengeance.
Ben-Hur, in theaters Friday from Paramount Pictures, rated PG-13. $5 doesn't buy much anymore, but $5 can change hearts and a nation. The 2016 presidential election has been very divisive, so what is a Christian to do? Kirby Anderson and the team at Point of View Radio will be here each day on the road to November, and your $5 investment will make a difference. You want to do more? Fine, do it, but please stop what you're doing and at least give us $5. Visit pointofview.net, look for the Donate Now button, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or send your gift to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Welcome back, everyone. Colonel Alan West, Executive Director, National Center for Policy Analysis, guest hosting Point of View Radio. Kirby Anderson is away on vacation in upstate New York. And 1-800-351-1212 is our call-in number. You hear that back there? I can't call her Bo Snerdley because someone else is already Bo Snerdley. So I guess I can call her Betty Snerdley. Would that be okay? Betty Snerdley? That would be a good number for you. Is that? Oh, she's giving me a look. If looks could kill, I would be 16 feet under right now. But I think Betty Snerdley is a good nickname. But we are going to be taking your phone calls here in this last half hour. So we will start out with John, who's from my great home state where I went to college, the University of Tennessee. John in Tennessee, you're live with me here at Point of View Radio. What's going on, my friend?
Well, just doing the same old thing, keeping it straight on down the road.
You got it. What's on your mind?
First of all, the personal responsibility, I guess, just some of the subject items that you were discussing earlier, and the tensions that we've got throughout our nation. The powers that be, we expect those that are in power to do the right thing. It doesn't seem like that's happening. But the personal responsibility as parents, and I think that's a key issue. Giving your kids a little bit of discipline, and it's tough to do in times such as this, with what we're being bombarded with on a daily basis. People feel as though the social media is the most important thing, and we let that babysit our kids, and that's not good.
No, you're absolutely right, John. I think that you have seen a purposeful move toward the breakdown of the family. And when you break down the family, you're not teaching that sense of responsibility. And when especially you have men that are no longer men, they're males, and they're not taking responsibility for their actions, such as going out and creating, children. I mean, this whole baby daddy thing, it just drives me absolutely bonkers. And I think that is one of the serious things we have to look at, especially when we look at our inner city communities. So
no doubt about that.
Yeah,
exactly.
it does come back to personal responsibility. It does come back to parents being parents, and we have to stop making victims. We've got to have people that understand that your sights have to be set higher than just
no doubt about it.
Yeah, and we're not doing that. But just understand that this is all about how people in elected positions can really control others. Because when you expand that dependency society instead of an opportunity society, then people are dependent upon you to continue to provide them that largesse that comes from the government treasury. And guess what? They will always make sure that you stay in office. And that's what this is all about.
That's unbelievable as it may seem. You're literally giving people permission to continue to be useless. And that's not what we want. That's not what America is all about.
No, it's about productive citizens, but productive, educated, engaged, and involved citizens is really not what is wanted here. There's a great quote, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote it in his book, Democracy in America, written back in the 1830s. Alexander Fraser Tytler, a Scottish political scientist, economist, also kind of alluded to it. He said that a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until a time when people realize they can vote their own largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the electorate will always elect those people promising them the most benefits, with the ensuing result being the collapse of a democracy over loose fiscal policy followed by a dictatorship. And that's the road we're on.
Exactly.
Well,
a lot of that has to do with common sense as well.
It does. Well, John, thank you so much for the call in. And I got to tell you something. I'm hearing great things about the Tennessee football this year. I think we finally turned that corner. We're ranked. I've seen some polls 8, most polls number 10. Mr. Producer here is shaking his head. I don't know where he probably went to Alabama or something like that. But I'm sensing we could have some great things on Rocky Top this year.
Indeed, we will.
Hey, and let it, everyone, I will be in Knoxville, Tennessee for a homecoming game against Kentucky. That's Veterans Day weekend. It's also our Army ROTC alumni reunion that we do every year. So I'm looking forward to my annual Mecca back to Knoxville. But, John, take care. God bless you.
You as well.
All right. We got Daniel from Nevada. How are you doing, Daniel?
Oh, hi, Mr. West. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Mr. West was my dad. I'm just Alan.
Okay, Alan. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say your closing statement before the break at the first half regarding, you mentioned the father of the victim, or, the guy that was shot in Milwaukee. And I haven't heard a more well thought out, accurate, right on the money in my entire life, man. And I was driving at work crying, driving down the road because I'm so tired of the victim mentality. And now I understand it because I was a social worker and I worked with kids living in the projects for 6 years. I fully understand it. But I have not heard anyone hit it right on the head such as you did, man. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I don't know if you wrote all that yourself, but, man, I would be very grateful if you could have somebody put that, transcribe that, and I would love to be able to share that on Facebook, because I have a lot of well-intentioned, good-hearted, quote-unquote, friends in Facebook that just don't get it. And, there's so much I could say, but I just wanted to acknowledge what you said, man. And I appreciate you being a guest on this show. I'm a long-time listener, and I've only called in a couple times before. And, man, the utmost respect to you and saying things that nobody will say or talk about. I was just in Baltimore, and, man, I was amazed at listening to some of the stuff that I was hearing going on. I didn't even mention it, the particular conference that it was, but anyway, man, I just thank you, and that's all I really wanted to say.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much. And no, I didn't write anything down. This is what I live, and this is what I believe, and that's why I say this is not about political parties. It's about principle, and it's about the principles upon which this country was established. And if we have people that stand up and say they're going to fundamentally transform who we are as a nation, then this is the path that we go down upon. And when we talk about victims of victors, I think that we did an incredible disservice to kids in the United States of America when a bunch of adults decided that they wanted to improve the self-esteem of some kids, and they came up with this insidious thing called a participation trophy.
Geez.
And so now we have generations that are now growing up and looking for their participation trophy, and this has become a cultural item. I'm sure, right, Daniel, you and I agree that you have to have safety nets out there, but everyone is supposed to climb a ladder of success and achievement. That's the great thing about America. No matter where you're born, no matter where you come from, you climb that ladder. The safety net is there to make sure that you do it. If you do fall, when you do fall, don't be afraid of falling, because that net is there to help you bounce back up and continue to climb. But there are some people that don't see the safety net. Some people believe in a hammock, and that's not a good thing.
That's right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It took me a while. I think a lot of people, I'm 42 years old, I think there's a lot of us kind of in my rough age bracket, call them Generation X for lack of better terms, whose parents had it maybe difficult and who our grandparents had it difficult. Now, I think knowing from a lot of the people, I'm a college graduate and whoop-de-doo, but a lot of us, I think our parents did not want us to have it as tough. And so some of our parents, I know a lot of people in this camp, they made it too easy on us. Now, well-intentioned, but it took me a while to grow up. Thank God I never got married. I wasn't ready for it. I am now, but I was not. For a long time, I was not prepared, and it's actually taken some time to get unindoctrinated by the public school system that I came up in, including, higher education as well. And so, anyways, man, I don't want to take more of your time, but thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And, when I go back to the Bible, I'm always reminded of Romans chapter 5, verses 3-5, where it talks about, trials and tribulation, it produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And then in James chapter 1, it talks about count it all joy when you encounter trials and tribulations. John 16:33, when it says, in this world, in this life, you will have tribulations, but be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. And so just the same as steel is purified through intense heat, just the same as a diamond is just a simple black rock until we put it through pressure and intense heat, we should not cower away from adversity. And I think that right now, when we see what our country is going through, there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity for us to come through on the other side, shining like a diamond, shining as the shining city that sits upon a hill. Alan West, guest hosting Point of View Radio. We'll be right back. I want to hear more of your calls. Thank you.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Colonel Alan West here, guest hosting Point of View Radio for my dear friend Kirby Anderson, upstate New York, on a little vacation. It's in our last 9 minutes, and I want to hear your thoughts, perspectives, and insights. We got a question from Michael out of Washington. I guess it came through on the internet. And the question is, what does Trump have to do to get on the positive side of the electorate? I will tell you that I personally, full disclosure, I personally know Mr. Trump. 3 of his properties were in the congressional district that I represented down in South Florida. I think the most important thing that Donald Trump has to do is get off the stage in front of these large crowds and audiences. He's got to go down and start talking to what I call Joe and Jane six-pack, everyday Americans, and I'm talking about all over the country. Don't see any colors, don't see any boundaries or what have you. Take his message, all parts of this nation, and it's a message about principle. It's a message about how do we restore our economy and get economic growth? How do we restore individual responsibility? How do we restore the sense of law and order, and as well as respect for our rule of law in this country? How do we make sure that we secure the American people domestically and also rebuild our military and its capability and capacity so that we can thwart the efforts of our enemies, foreign and who are coming across the border, and domestic? And that means that we are a sovereign nation. We have to be able to protect that border. So I think that it has to be a positive message. You have to talk about not so much what people should be against, but what people should be for, and restore that sense of that vision of the shining city that sits upon a hill. America is a beacon of liberty, freedom, and democracy. And he needs to empower Americans and speak about liberty and what liberty really means. There's a great quote from Abraham Lincoln. It's called his Liberty and Tyranny quote. He spoke about this April the 18th, 1864, at a speech in Baltimore, Maryland, where he talked about that we all declare for liberty, and the Americans right now are in certain need of a definition of the word liberty. For some, the word liberty may mean what a person can do with themselves and the product of that person's labor, while for others, the same word may mean what other people can do with other people and the product of other people's labor. And he ends up saying that here, are two different things that are called of the same name, but they are both incompatible. And in the end, you're talking about liberty and tyranny. We got to get back to talking about how do we advance liberty, that sense of empowering the individual American to be able to go out and set their own course, pursue their own happiness, not people that sit back and say that it's about how we determine your outcomes. And I think that's philosophically the big difference that we see going into this election cycle and what we have seen in the past 7.5 years. Folks, this is about constitutional conservatism and progressive socialism. And progressive socialism is all about redistribution of wealth. It's about nationalizing production. It's about creating and expanding a welfare nanny state, a dependency society. It's about social egalitarianism. We're all the same. We're all equal. And as I said early in the show, Hillary Clinton said, an economy that works for all. That's not the government's role and responsibility. It's about, providing and setting the conditions and the policies that enable us to live in an atmosphere where we can pursue that happiness. And lastly, most importantly, we can't go down the path of secular humanism, because our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness come from a creator, do not come from man. That's a very important distinction. And we need to understand that. And again, that's why this Point of View radio show is so important, and you need to support it to make sure that it stays on air here. Because if we're not able to talk about these things, if we're not able to share these insights and perspectives, if we're not able to, again, empower and strengthen you by educating you and inform you about these critical issues that are going on. And I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to listen to us here and be able to understand that. So we have another call that is coming in. Betty Snerdley is typing away here on my machine. Let's see what she's going to come up with. And I know I'm going to get killed when this show is over, but that's okay. She's a lovely young lady. Who we got there, ma'am? Uh-oh, she's not there. She's not ready yet. Well, look, while she's typing it in, we got John from WLJN in Michigan. John, how are you doing?
Thank you for taking my call. Alan, I discuss and debate online a lot with secularists and humanists and atheists and so on. And the theme that I try to advance as a solution for our culture is that we return to the old, I say old, the Old Testament, but the biblical principles that we have in the Old Testament. We don't have we are not under the law as Christians anymore, as far as are being justified. But the biblical principles for life, righteousness, personal moral responsibility, liberty, justice, social order, all are there. Mm-hmm. And one key principle that I often advance is, it comes out of Leviticus 19, and where the writer says, be just to your neighbor, do not favor either the rich or the poor. And if we adopted just that one principle in our governmental policy as a people, determined we would not elect people who were going to favor either the rich or the poor, but allowed the industry of people to provide their own benefit or consequences. And then, out of Christian compassion, we allowed the private sector alone to pick up the slack for people who just aren't going to make it otherwise. Then we would revolutionize our culture. But until we educate our present generation and our coming generations in these biblical principles, which cannot be done in government education anymore, that's out, we're going to have to develop our own Christ-centered educational system, which I think the secular world will flock to if we really get with the program and churches and communities develop that for their community. With good academics, we have to have superior academics and all that. But we have to go back to the principles so that the people understand, can perceive and discern the motivations of politicians that are running for office, to understand what they're really going to do when they get in office. Because if they don't believe in these kind of principles, then they're not going to honor their own word, much less do what we want them to do.
No, you're absolutely right, John. And I just want to let you know, I will be up in Bay Harbor, Michigan this weekend, speaking for Northwood University and their free market economic seminar and symposium. But you bring up a great point. It comes back to education. And I often tell people that the most important elected position in the United States of America is not president, it's not, congressman, senator, mayor, governor, whatever, it's school board. Because we have to be able to influence the education of our young children. But yet the lowest turnout for any elected office in the United States of America is school board elections. And then we look around and we see what is happening, the type of, really negative, doctrinal or materials that are crept into our schools. And you're right. It is not about favoring rich or poor, but when you do favor one over the other, that's the transfer of power. That's the transfer of power that goes to the elected officials.
That's right.
And so the community has to get involved. The church has to get involved. I talked with Pastor Todd Wagner about how the Johnson Amendment is silencing pastors, and we also look at how they're taxing charitable contributions. All right, I gotta run because I am less than 1 minute before they shut me down here. But thank you so much, John, for calling in, and I'm looking forward to experiencing pure Michigan this weekend. Hey, look, folks, I got about 40 seconds to go. It is such an honor and a blessing to be able to come on Point of View Radio. And Point of View Radio does not exist without your support. And I want you to, take it to heart to support this incredible ministry, this incredible platform that allows us to share with you and make sure that you can participate in this great experiment that our founding fathers gave to us 240 years ago. September the 17th, 1787, Benjamin Franklin came out of Constitution Hall, met Mrs. Powell. She said, well, doctor, do we have a republic or a monarchy? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. Colonel Allen West, get out there and fight and keep this republic. God bless you.
With $5, you can change your mood with a cup of coffee, or you can change our future. Point of View listeners have started ministries. They've run for Congress and won. They've become lawyers defending our liberties. What will your $5 gift produce? What if you give more? This is a pivotal moment in America's history, and your investment in Point of View can change a life and change America, but only if you give. Visit pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151, or send at least $5 to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. A prince, falsely accused of treason, separated from his family and the woman he loves, forced into slavery. He returns home seeking revenge, but instead finds redemption. It's Brother Against Brother in Ben-Hur with Academy Award winner Morgan Freeman.
If your brother is the pride of Rome, defeat him and you'll defeat an empire. Then you will have your vengeance.
Ben-Hur, in theaters Friday from Paramount Pictures, rated PG-13. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.